Bonjour, Euroites. So, I unfortunately am unable to be in class today, and sadly, not going to be in class on Monday either. So, kind of a bummer. Unfortunately, we're going to have to do a couple of recorded lessons this time to finish out the semester to get you ready for your final exam because some family issues have come up, so I will be gone a bit. So, what we're going to do is I will have Mr. Hutchinson, and then on Monday, whoever your substitute is, probably Mr. Hawbaker, play their lectures for you. I'll also put them on my YouTube channel, and then you've got those available if you need to review them a little before our review time on Tuesday. But basically, best thing you guys can be doing to get ready for the exam is to get caught up, because it sounds like, or at least I got the impression yesterday, that a lot of you are a bit behind. I think it's safe to say, a bit behind in some of the reading, and maybe don't have a lot of your French Revolutionary facts all up to date. So what I would highly recommend is you get ready for that and make sure that these notes make sense. So ask me questions on Tuesday if you have them, or email them to me, and let us begin. So, yesterday when we were talking about the National Assembly, some of the big changes that they were making, and the National Assembly, the first new government since the fall of the Ancien regime, is working assiduously at this point to come up with a new constitution. Now, all of you may recall the French Declaration of Independence, basically, which was inspired and co-written by Thomas Jefferson. And so, of course, what was the name of that piece of paper? What was that name of that parchment? Yes, I can hear you saying Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. So that is the basis for reforming their new system, this Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, something that tries to guarantee the Enlightenment, tries to guarantee equality before the law, tries to guarantee reasonable and effective lawmaking for all people. And so what they want to do now is have, rather than these feeble attempts at an absolute monarchy, they want to have a constitutional monarchy. So we got through all this yesterday. We'll just kind of fly through them through it again. Nobility abolished as of August the 4th. Now the National Assembly makes all the decisions. Women's rights will be addressed in some way, however not too much, because it goes back to that stereotype of women from the Ancien regime. And one saucy little minx who was absolutely livid about that, of course, was Mary Wollstonecraft. That's right. She was quite upset about their opinions, and justifiably so. So she writes the Vindication of the Rights of Women, gives us a glorious quote, and then that brings us to the issue of the church, which is where we left off yesterday at the end of class. So basically, you've got the establishment of a new nationalized French church. Now, they're still going to be called the Catholic Church. It's still going to be called, it will still be the Catholic establishment. However, they will be, I would say, definitely be shaking things up a bit, going a little overzealous on the idea of separation of, I don't even know if you'd call it separation of church and state, but they were borrowing from the Americans, saying, okay, well, we don't want the church to be this independent body that's controlling politics or influencing things through tax-free land and wielding influence over some king or anything like that. Instead, what they wanted to do is have a church that would be subordinate to the state. And so what they would do is then make it so that priests are chosen by voters, and they are also going to say that now any priest that remains needs to swear an oath of allegiance. And so my arrow should be there, sorry for that. But the oath of allegiance, basically now, if you want to remain a member of the clergy, you must pledge your allegiance to the state, which, by today's standards, you got priests in America, of course, that will, say the national anthem. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But the problem is that they're taking it a step further here and saying now that the clergy are essentially employees of the state. They are paid by the state. They are chosen by voters who make up the state. And so that is going to really tick off some people, as we'll find out. The countryside, they're going to see 80 to 90% refusal rate. All right, so 80 to 90% of people in the rural areas, hardcore Catholics, going to side with their priests, their conservative priests, that will refuse to take the oath of allegiance, and they will become what are known as refractory priests. So keep that term in mind, refractory priests. So a refractory priest is going to start to to lead the people against the state, saying that, hey, they're trying to make us swear this oath of allegiance, but we won't. And so this is the birth of the counter-revolution. So when we get to the Reign of Terror, we'll see part of the reason there is a Reign of Terror is because of so much resistance to this idea of a national church, so much resistance to these ideas of changing the cultural and religious background of France. So, a little bit of a lesson to be learned. When you're really trying to change things up politically, maybe you shouldn't mess with culture and especially religion, because then you lose a lot of followers. So the birth of the counter-revolution starts here. Refractory priests will lead that counter-revolution against the new state. So the new constitutional monarchy. But by September of 91, that's all stuff, the problems with the counter-revolution, that's all coming a little bit later. But right now, September of 1791, everything looks glorious because they officially have a new constitution. They've taken all those beautiful ideas in the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, they have combined them into a larger constitution, codified it into law, and now you've got Louis XVI nodding and smiling, wearing his French tricolor, and saying, yes, of course, this is a wonderful idea. I love this. I will sign it into law. You guys are all wonderful lawmakers. What was I thinking trying to be king? Ha, ha, ha. Yeah, all right. So, in response, Robespierre, who was a member of the National Assembly and a representative and a fellow lawmaker, he said, the revolution is over. Oh, Robespierre, thankfully you are wrong on that occasion because we will see many fun things happening very soon. All right, moving on. So by the way, if in the event that we're cruising through the PowerPoint a little too quickly and you guys don't get all the notes at the end of a slide, again, they are online at the moment. You can download the paper copy if you've not done so already. You can rewatch this video on YouTube, or you can ask Mr. Hutchinson to simply hit pause. Moving on. All right, so some problems by 1791. Some issues that are happening as the result of the changes. You've effectively rocked the boat. When America, I said that wrong. When America decided to, resist the dirty Brits and declare their independence and create their own country, that was a pretty big deal. I would say I fist pump for it, right? You all fist pump for it too. So it was a pretty big deal. However, it was 1,500 miles away. It was across a big pond. And so, as the result, it was just kind of like, shrug your shoulders, whatever, move on with life, right? In Europe, that's what they're thinking. However, in France, you've got a country in the heart of Europe. It is one of the bastions of the Ancien regime in terms of, formerly of conservative rule, a king, and nobility, and heredity, and all of these great things that have been around since the Middle Ages. So when you've got a country that effectively is turned on its head and totally changes things politically, everybody in Europe is going to be freaking out. Absolutely freaking out. All of the upper class folk are going to be freaking out. One such dude was a little man by the name of Edmund Burke. So, Sir Eddie Burke, he's hanging out in England at this time. You've heard of him. He gives us a glorious quote. Let's see if I can remember it here. Said something along the lines of, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Great quote, right? So, Edmund Burke, he gives us some more food for thought, if you will. In 1790, he wrote a little document called Reflections on the Revolution in France. And so in Edmund Burke's Reflections on the Revolution in France, he's basically giving us a huge defense of conservatism. Basically saying, that wonderful stick that we have up our bums here in England about maintaining social hierarchy and not letting the unwashed masses vote and, not letting women have the right to divorce and, not changing things, essentially, not rocking the boat. That's a good thing. We should not rock the boat. Instead, we should keep our pillars of awesomeness. And so in England, we have one such pillar being Parliament. So he's saying, hey, we should have Parliament in England because it's awesome. In France, I gotta say, Edmund Burke, seriously, dude, they're trying to establish a system that's very similar to England. France wants to have an Estates General. Edmund Burke is like, hey, we gotta have Parliament. What's the difference, right? Well, the difference is that the French are shaking things up, and it's starting to spread around the rest of Europe. Other European countries are starting to freak out because they're like, well, if France is going to do it, maybe they're going to try and do it here. So Edmund Burke, even though he's saying, yeah, you guys are basically trying to do what we've been doing since the Magna Carta, tough cookies. Only we can do it because we did it right the first time. All right, so another thing that Edmund Burke says is that the revolution in France will break down into tyranny and chaos. How right you will be, Edmund Burke. How right you will be indeed, especially by 1793. So, we'll get to that here soon. Now, the reason that's all going to start happening, it's going to get ugly here. Part of the reason is because the king and his family will flee. So, the king, along with Marie Antoinette and his daughter Marie Theresa Charlotte, and their son Louis XVII, they are all going to dress as commoners and take off. They're going to get in a horsebound carriage and leave. Now, the reason is because Louis and Marie have been writing, numerous documents, a myriad of documents to their relatives, the Habsburgs, over in Austria, telling them, please, you must stop this revolution. You must get a coalition together, prepare an army. The army in France is no longer under our control, but many of our officers have fled to your territories as immigrés, and you should take those immigré officers, raise royalist armies, and come and fight to save us, and save France, and reestablish our ancien regime system. So, it's not working out so well, because they can't really, start a counter-revolution in Paris. So what the king and Marie are going to decide to do at the request of their Habsburg relatives is to leave France in disguise, incognito, and make their way over to the Austrian Habsburg lands. So there you go. You've got Marie Antoinette and Louis and their babies dressing as commoners, dressed as a locksmith, in fact, and taking a nice long trip in the middle of the night in a horsebound carriage all the way to the border. Now, they're going to make it through a couple of different checkpoints, but they will be stopped by another commoner at Varennes. So at Varennes, you're going to have a common man who was a fan of the revolution. He was a guard at the checkpoint at Varennes, and being that it is a revolutionary time, and also the threat of war is ever persistent on the border, especially with Austria, he is going to be checking some people's documents, and out will come the king, and he will say, "My liege, you look very familiar." And so he's going to recognize the king, and the king is going to basically tell the guy, "Yes, I am your king. Now you will let me pass." And the guy will say, "Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I will not let you pass because this is the revolution." And so, as a result, the king and his family thoroughly embarrassed. Let's put it that way. I mean, try to imagine it this way. All right, take that back for a second. Let's try to imagine it this way. Let's say that because the economy was so bad in America, and we're having so many issues in America at this today. And disagreements between Congress and the Republicans and the Democrats, that President Barack Obama and Michelle Obama and the Obama girls and even their pet dog decided to get in a limo and cruise over to Canada to make a break for England to talk to our allies about starting a counter-revolution against the Republicans. Yeah, wouldn't look good, right? Would not look good. So as a result, you can imagine the king was red in the face at this point. And so they're going to be brought back to Paris, and they will, at this point, the National Assembly just does not know what to do with them. They're trying to decide, okay, what the heck do we do with the royal family? Because they're embarrassing us, making it look like a counter-revolution should happen, and then they've got the Declaration of Pillnitz on their hands, because Austria and Prussia, being relatives to the Bourbon family here, they're going to send a little declaration, a little message to the National Assembly, and say that if you harm a single hair on the royal family's heads, we will intervene. And in this case, of course, intervention means war. Oh, glorious. So, what that will mean is that the National Assembly, right when things are getting interesting, they'll say, well, we're done. Right as things are getting interesting politically, just after they pass a constitution, just as things are getting ugly as a possibility for war, they're going to just say, yeah, I think we'll have an election. So they're going to call it quits, and they will form a new legislative assemblies. So, our first form of government after the fall of the Ancien regime was called the Yes, National Assembly. I'm sure that's what you said. Okay, the National Assembly, our second form of government, our second representative institution after the fall of the Ancien regime will be called the... Yes, thank you. Legislative Assembly. Okay, so those are our two representative assemblies that we've got by October of 1791. These guys, however, are going to be a little bit different because they are a bunch of new members that are coming in. Many of them are wealthy, educated, middle-class legislators. So, wealthy, educated, middle-class legislators. So, first of all, being that they are wealthy, they are a wealthy middle class. So, they're upper middle class bourgeoisie types, right? So, they've got a little bit of money, and they've spent a lot of time educating themselves. And of course, the education vogue of the day was the Enlightenment. And the more liberal side of the Enlightenment is what they're thinking of at this point. Things like John Locke, and they're looking at Rousseau, and they're thinking, all right, well, what we need to do is change the laws, and we don't need the king and queen anymore. We also do not need to fear anyone as we shake things up, because many of these guys are also Jacobins. Now, those of you that have also, actually done the reading from Chambers know that the Jacobin Club, they were a Parisian political group that were ultra-radical. They were totally opposed to the monarchy. They wanted to totally shake things up. They wanted a republic. They wanted to do things differently. And so this group that's coming in, they want a liberal revolution, and they do not trust the monarchy. Now that the king tried to flee to Varennes, they've got even less reason to trust this man. And so now what they want to do is they're starting to talk about, well, hey, if everyone's going to be threatening us from around Europe, all these dirty conservatives in Europe tell us that they're going to come and burn, rape, and pillage in France if we decide to hurt the royal family. Well, fine. Why don't we get rid of the royal family? Then why don't we use our revolutionary army to crush those dirty conservatives wherever they may be? Ah! Now, right now, you need to imagine me holding my big broadsword, stabbing someone in the chest, like, I don't know, like Forrest. He's sitting there. I'm stabbing you in the chest right now, Forrest. Blah! Blah! Yeah! Kill the dirty conservatives. Blah! All right, so go for a war of liberation for Europe. Oh, it's going to be beautiful. So they're getting hasty. They essentially want to spread democracy, right? Spread democracy to the rest of the world, even if they don't want it. All right, so Europe is on the verge here because by April of 1792, they will declare war on Francis II of Austria-Hungary. So by declaring war on Austria-Hungary, guess who else is going to get involved? Yep, every other conservative power in Europe. And we're talking about Prussia, and you don't want to mess with the Prussians. Their blue and pink uniforms are scary, and they are hardcore militarists. You also are going to end up having to tussle with England, and you don't want to mess with them because they got the Navy, right? And then eventually Spain's going to be brought into it. I mean, it's just going to be ugly. The Netherlands, they'll be brought into it. Ugh, ugly. All right, so point being, you don't want to mess with the rest of Europe, but France is about to do it. Oh, man. And, honestly, guys, they're going to do it pretty well, but it's going to take them some struggles first. So, war and cataclysm coming here because the first coalition is going to be prepared here to start fighting against France. And it's primarily happening on their borders at this point because they declared war on border states, which was not the most brilliant idea. So if you take a look at the map here, you can see who they're going to be fighting against. So you've got the Austrian Habsburgs with the Austrian Netherlands up there in the northeastern corner. Then you've got the vestiges of the Holy Roman Empire, quote unquote, basically a bunch of conservative princes that want to maintain their principalities, and Prussia. All of these countries going to be fighting on the borders there with France. And I mean, basically, the border is left unprotected. I mean, their army is in shambles. A third of their officer class left already. So they got a bunch of noobs in there that don't know what they're doing. So, I mean, good luck with this one, France. I mean, not very brilliant. So, Austria and the Austrian Netherlands, just to throw this on the board for you as well. Prussia joining the ranks, and the emigres. Because remember, all of those dirty nobles who left as of July the 14th, 1789, they went over to the HRE, or Austria, or Prussia. They started some little counter-revolutionary royalist groups, and now they are ready to fight. All right, so not going to work out real well, as we'll find out. Now, or initially anyway, excuse me. Now, the road to Paris will lay open at this point. You're going to have a saucy Prussian general by the name of the Duke of Brunswick, and the Duke of Brunswick is going to issue a little thing called the Brunswick Manifesto. So, as the French armies were being beaten in the field by both Austrian and Prussian forces, they fell back, and they had nowhere left to go. They retreated back to Paris, hoping to God that they could defend there, but knowing that they had slim chances. So, the Duke of Brunswick knew this. He knew that it was just a matter of time before he would be on the steps of Paris, and as he was about 20 or 30 miles outside of out of the gates of Paris, he sent a little message to Paris. And he said, "Hey guys, guess what? If you decide to defend Paris, I will destroy the entire city brick by brick and burn it to the ground." Oh, all right, that's quite the bold claim. So the Duke of Brunswick thinks he's got it in the bag here, right? Well, thankfully, Louis XVI, being a bit of a big fat idiot, decided to, rather than saying, "Hey guys, maybe we should actually get patriotic here and fight against this invader," instead, Louis XVI decided to mass publish and mass produce the Brunswick Manifesto, and he spread it all throughout Paris. And he said, "Hey Parisians, listen, maybe you guys shouldn't defend the city because really we should have our king back. We should have royalism." No, that's not what the Parisians will say. They will say, "To heck with the Duke of Brunswick and to heck with the monarchy. We will defend to the last." Going all Spartan here on him. Glorious. Oh, man. And so, in their anger, as the king, that saucy, pedantic knave, is deciding to spread the Brunswick Manifesto around, the men and women of Paris are going to get angry, and they will attack the royal family at the Tuileries Palace, where they were now living, on August the 10th, 1792. Now, the royal family, they're freaking out. At this point, what they did was they had some guards stand there and guard the back secret exit so that they could get away as quickly as possible. Those guards were then massacred by the angry mob, their heads put on pikes and displayed all around town, and the royal family fled over to the Legislative Assembly. They basically ran to the Legislative Assembly and said, "Hey guys, you gotta protect us. You gotta do something for us to keep them from killing us." And then, it was kind of funny, the Legislative Assembly said, "All right, well, we're going to suspend you from all royal functions. We're also going to imprison you. And then, we've only been in office for a year, but holy crap, this is hard. We got a war. We've got political problems. We've got angry mobs outside our doors demanding the head of the king and queen. We're going to call it quits." So the Legislative Assembly, after only a year of doing business, they decided, I think we're done here. And so they decided to quit and have a new election. And so, since the last guys couldn't do it, they were, moderate-leaning liberal fellows who could not deal with all the issues of the day. We're going to have a new election. And what kind of people will we elect? Crazy radical liberals. That's right. Okay, so the Second French Revolution is what we're entering into now, the radical second phase of the revolution. It begins with the election of a new representative assembly. So first we had the National Assembly, then we had the Legislative Assembly, then we have the... Yes, some of you maybe did your reading and are screaming out, National Convention. Hopefully, maybe either that or Mr. Hutchinson is shaking his head sadly at you right now, which I'm willing to bet might be the case. So, the National Convention, they're going to come in at this point, and they are elected by universal male suffrage. Now, that's important for a couple of reasons. First of all, no country ever up to this point, no modern country since the fall of Greece and Rome has had a universal male suffrage kind of election. Now so that's a big deal. But then the other even bigger deal for the history of France here is the fact that when you've got universal male suffrage, that means not only are the upper class bourgeoisie men voting, but now you've got the radicalized, poor and hungry men from the streets voting, and they will vote in the most radical kind of people they can get because they want guarantees of their daily bread, they want guarantees of their safety and the preservation of the revolution, and they want guarantees that they're going to win the friggin' war. So they're going to get the craziest guys in there they can. So that brings us into the second revolution, this radical stage. Now it begins with the end of the where was I? Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. Oh yeah, so it begins with after the Duke of Brunswick issued his manifesto. You've got about a month there where they're going through the issues of how do we deal with this situation, and then trying to get an army raised and all of that. And so they're just barely fending off the Prussians. But then as they are barely fending off the Prussians just on the outskirts of Paris, there's going to be all these wild rumors, all kinds of rumors that are going to lead to a nasty massacre. So all kinds of wild rumors about counter-revolution from Parisian prisons happening at this time, because as the men are going off to fight, grabbing whatever they can and running out without any kind of uniforms whatsoever, just running out to defend against the Prussian army, they're going to start saying, okay, well, wait a second. If we're leaving the town, we've got hundreds, thousands, even tens of thousands of refractory priests and royalists that are in the prisons right now in Paris. And if we leave the town undefended, these guys are going to break out and try and do something. So what's the best thing that we should do, people? I mean, really, what do? You kill all of them. Ooh, okay, yes, exactly. That's what they're going to do. So they're going to get a mob of popular tribunals. They're going to slaughter 2,000 prisoners. It is going to be absolute chaos and pandemonium. Basically, you're going to grab a sword. You're going to run into the prison. You're going to have a board of about 4 or 5 different guys that are going to stand there, and they're going to say, okay, bring forward the next prisoner. Oh, you are a refractory priest. In that case, we will run you through. And yeah, that's the consequence. So just one murder right after the other of these prisoners. Now, those of you who have seen The Dark Knight Rises, the newest Batman movie, first of all, awesome. All right, if you haven't seen it, shame on you. Go rent it this weekend and go watch it a couple of times. Or you can borrow it from me, because I am watching it tonight, because I just got it from Santa, and I'm thoroughly excited about it to watch it again and again and again. So anyway, The Dark Knight Rises, for those of you that have seen it or are about to see it, when you watch it, you'll see that the character played by Cillian Murphy, at one point, he is sitting on top of this throne of basically demolished furniture. He's just got this big pile of debris under him, and he's got a big table there, and then on both sides are angry people from the streets of Gotham, all these angry Gothamites that are acting as revolutionaries there, right? And then you've got these people that they're bringing forward who they just, very similar to what you saw in the September massacres, they think that, oh, you must be a counter-revolutionary, therefore you must die. So, pretty crazy, and a cool historical reference in a fantastic film. Just something for you to think about. Now, here is a little video clip for you.
In the first week of September, disastrous news arrives from the front. Prussia has taken Verdun, a town on the road to Paris. The enemy is now just miles away. The fear gripping Paris explodes. The sans-culottes break into the prisons and unleash a furious assault on the city's inmates. They will leave no traitor alive.
And the sans-culottes went to the prisons, particularly the prisons where refractory priests were being held, where nobles were being held, where political prisoners were being held, and they started carrying out their own impromptu trials that were very short and that very often simply ended with slaughter.
Women are raped and brutalized, priests disemboweled, aristocrats hacked to pieces. In a primeval slaughter, more than 1,600 are left dead in a matter of days. When word of the September massacres spreads throughout Europe, enemies of the revolution are sickened. Across the English Channel, the London Times gives voice to the revulsion.
Are these the rights of man? Is this the liberty of human nature? The most savage, four-footed tyrants that range unexplored Africa rise superior to these two-legged Parisian animals.
The revolution has taken an inalterable turn. Even Robespierre understands that things have gone too far, that the people cannot manage the revolution on their own. They need guidance, an iron hand. And with the power of his words, the incorruptible rises to the forefront as the man who will guide the revolution.
Oh, beautiful. All right, so a couple things stand out with that clip. First of all, you notice they were talking about the sans-culottes. So the sans-culottes, that literally means without breeches. So they did not have the kinds of short pants or the breeches that the nobility and often the bourgeoisie would wear. So they had long trousers. Now, these guys had a lot of cool fashion statements. I mean, first of all, they wore long trousers. Frequently, those trousers would be red and white. Then they would wear a white shirt, and they would have a blue jacket. How cool is that, right? Red, white, and blue. I mean, come on, obviously. But it's also the tricolor. And then they would always wear a red sock cap. So basically a red beanie. And so that was the sign that they were a citizen. So that was the symbol that they were one of the sans-culottes. And the sans-culottes were the people of the streets, basically. These unskilled laborers, frequently urban types that are struggling to maintain their daily bread. They are ultra-nationalistic. They are swept up in the fervor of the times, the patriotism of the times, and they are being swept up also by the very radical press by guys like Jean-Paul Marat. So they're the ones responsible for that absolutely terrible and nefarious massacre in September of 1792. Now, you also notice that Robespierre, the incorruptible, is going to rise at this point as a man that is trying to take hold of the National Convention, trying to find a way to establish a revolution that is, certainly going to change things, but one that's not going to turn in on itself. Ironically enough, that's going to be exactly what's going to happen. So Robespierre, the incorruptible, decides that the people can't handle this revolution, and now what we need to do is establish a different kind of system. So what we need to do is first get rid of the king entirely by abolishing the constitutional monarchy, changing the constitution, bringing in a new constitution that guarantees a republic. And so a republic at this time is a very liberal form of government. It's not exactly radical, but it's a very liberal form of government. It's something that we did in America, but again, America's already unconventional because we're awesome. But in France, very liberal. So the National Convention, as they come in, if we take a look at their political makeup, again, they are mostly from which political group in Paris? Which political group? Yes, the Jacobins. I think I could hear a couple of you. So, most of them are Jacobins. They are radicals, those Jacobin radicals. All right, and then the majority of them are well-educated, middle-class members of society. Again, appeals to the Enlightenment here. All right, and then also the appeal to the growth of power and status under this new system where now the educated bourgeoisie have far more authority and power than the nobility ever had under the, or lower nobility anyway, ever had under the Ancien regime. So, what they are going to do, though, is have a big problem between the more conservative members of this National Convention and the far more radical ones. So you have the Girondists. The Girondists, they were from the county, the French county of Gironde, which is in southwestern France, and they were far more rural, and therefore they were more Catholic, and they were far more opposed to the kinds of things they saw happening in this much more radical second stage of the revolution. They favored the old constitutional monarchy. They, didn't exactly agree with the nationalized church. And then you had the Mountain. The Mountain was the nickname for the Jacobin Club, because the Mountain, they were led by Robespierre and a guy named Georges Jacques Danton. So the reason that, first of all, that they called them the Mountain was because on one side of the National Convention, in the elevated seats of the National Convention, is where the Jacobins all sat and yelled at the other groups. And so they were seen as almost like a mountain towering above the rest. Then the Girondists were slightly below them and on the other side of the National Convention. And then down below you had what was called the Plain, or nicknamed the Plain, which these were the group of people that were moderate. They were neutral on a lot of these things, didn't know which way to go on some of these big, tough issues. And so they were the group that both sides were arguing over to try and get control of, because the Mountain knew if they had the Plain, then they could control the National Convention. The Girondists knew the same about the Plain. And so everybody's trying to get those independent people in the middle. So That's the problems that we have at this time. Now, if we take a look at Robespierre, he's a super nerd, right? A super nerd indeed. He's a lawyer. He is hardcore with the Enlightenment, a writer as well. Someone that most of the people like the sans-culottes, most French men and women cannot really relate to. But then you've got Danton. Georges-Jacques Danton, he was gregarious. He was bombastic. He was a tremendous drinker. He was a tremendous debaucherer as well. He is the kind of guy that just physically represented the people and the revolution in a way that Robespierre never could. So what he's going to do is be the voice that's going to start calling men to join to arms, to save this French Revolution, calling to the sans-culottes to join together to help get rid of the problems internally inside France that are tearing apart the revolution. And then Robespierre is going to be the mastermind behind making this happen. So together they will try to work in this National Convention to create a far more liberal or radical revolution. Now, the National Convention is going to deal with their first order of business, dealing with the issue of the problem of the king. So they're going to take a look at the at Louis' situation, and they decided through a narrow majority that Louis needed to be convicted of treason. And of course, the punishment for treason, everyone, is the guillotine. Yes. So Dr. Guillotine invented the guillotine as for the French as a method of being more humane in methods of killing criminals. So you might remember from our trivia day before Christmas break that Louis XVI didn't like some of the torture methods that were used against criminals, such as breaking on the wheel or the Iron Maiden or any of those fun things. So rather than doing that, Louis XVI said, "Hey, Dr. Guillotine, we need an instrument of death that will more quickly kill our victims, our criminals. That way, they don't have to feel as much pain." Hey, lucky for him, because he's going to be convicted and he will then be shaved by the revolutionary razor on January the 21st of 1793, or as I like to call it, it is Regicide Day. January the 21st, 1793, Regicide Day. So, they're going to commit regicide. Now, the reason is because, Robespierre, he almost didn't vote in favor of killing the king, but he finally decided and told the National Convention, you have to kill the king so that the revolution can live. Oh, beautiful. So the king, he's going to ascend the scaffold at 10:22 a.m. on January the 21st, 1793. And as he walked up to the scaffold, he was received by a priest who gave him absolution and I believe also gave him the Eucharist. And then as he walked up onto the scaffold in his pajamas with no wig, with no kind of bombast or pomp or pageantry, he went up and tried to make a speech. Remember, this is a king who just wanted to be loved. And so he tried to make a speech to his people, saying, "I trust that my death will be for the happiness of my people. But I grieve for France, and I fear that she may suffer the anger of the Lord." And then they tied the noose around his neck, and he dropped. Now, sadly for Louis, as he started to make his speech, no one heard him, couldn't hear his speech except the people in the front row, because the guards tried to drown him out with a drum roll. So just kind of a symbol of how far Louis had fallen, pun intended, on this occasion. All right, so now what the National Convention is going to do next is to create a war against tyranny. So basically they're trying to spread democracy to everybody, whether they want it or not, and they're going to take their revolution on the road. And so if anyone wants to, essentially they're trying to defend their revolution, save their revolution by killing everybody else who disagrees with them. So by February of 93, they're going to declare war on Great Britain, on Holland, on Spain, on Austria, and Prussia. Which means, basically, really, really, really good idea. Right? Right, Euroites? Fantastic idea. France, come on. Alright, so, bad idea. So, what this will turn into then is not only a life and death struggle to protect the revolution abroad, but also a life and death political struggle within the National Convention between the more conservative-leaning Girondists and the far more radical Jacobins. So, the Girondists don't trust the Jacobins. They see them as a dictatorship. And the Jacobins, meanwhile, keep telling everyone that the Girondists are a bunch of dirty conservative royalists that would like to wear their purple and they're white for the king and for royalism, and decide to, bring back another king, in this case, Louis XVII. And so you got a bunch of name-calling, a bunch of mean talk, and so that's going to lead to some problems. You might recall when we were talking about Crane Brinton and his theory of a revolution, the moderates can't stay in power for long because there's always too many problems with the revolution that make the moderates fall from power. And it always goes to a radical group. The most radical group that can take over will be the ones that will run the show. And so by the spring of 1793, the sans-culottes are going to act as a bit of a political army here for the Jacobins, because they too are pissed. They, again, are called without breeches because of their style of clothing. Now, their demands by the spring of 1793 are mostly economic. Basically, what they're looking at here is they want their guarantee of daily bread. I mean, since 1788 and 89, they've not had enough bread at all, and they are saying, hey, it's time for you to guarantee that. So they're going to vote in and support the most radical people that will guarantee that through price controls and through basically getting rid of capitalism and bringing in a type of emergency socialism. So the group that says, hey, we'll totally do that if you help us kill the Girondists, would be the Jacobins. So the Jacobins will get the sans-culottes to help them, and part of the reason that this is so easy for the Jacobins to get their attention is because the Jacobins are controlling the much more popular press, like L'Ami des Peuples, I think is how you say it. Keeley can correct me on that one. But the newspaper that Jean-Paul Marat was writing for, he was a Jacobin, and it was a Jacobin radical newspaper. And so the sans-culottes, they're reading through those pages like crazy. They're tearing through that stuff, loving every word of it, hinging on every word from Marat. And so what they will do is say, all right, well, if Marat wants us to join the Jacobins, then we will. And so, the Jacobins, on June the 2nd of 1793, another date that you need to know in history, June the 2nd, 1793, they will purge the National Convention. Bring in a bunch of guns, bring in the sans-culottes with their swords and their fishing knives, and bring them in there and put the Girondists at sword point and gun point and bayonet point, and tell them that either they join, or they leave, or they die. All right, so many of them will flee as immigrés, those that could get away. Many of them will be arrested and put on trial and then sent to the guillotine. All in all, it's ugly, because Robespierre and the Jacobins, they will totally own the National Convention at this point, using the sans-culottes to organize this beautiful, glorious uprising. All right, so hopefully you got all of that. We will have part 2 of this discussion and look at the radical side of the Reign of Terror starting on Monday. Again, if you have any questions, email me over the weekend, and I will see you later.